This is the Infinity Summit Group. Truth, passion, success.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Infinity Summit Group podcast. Today is June 12th, 2023. We got another special guest on here today. I'm Noah.
Xavier.
Logan.
Jesse.
We got a special guest on here today, Jim.
Jim, hi.
There you go.
Hello.
And he's a repeat guest. We had him on a year and a half ago-ish, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't get it right the first time, so it brought me back to
We had to retry.
straighten it out.
No, we've been having all the guests on about a year after just to check up on them, how they're doing, what they're doing different in life, if anything. And my first question for you is, you're kind of a collector of old things, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to know, has there been any other, or I'll say new old things that you've collected in the past year and a half that you're excited about?
Oh, yes. The most important thing, and I think when you guys came over, I showed it to you, was an original artifact from the Napoleonic Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I am not a fan of Napoleon. Everybody who knows me knows that. And the only thing I'd ever want from Napoleon's era would be what I got. And I found an original solid silver medal, MEDAL, okay, that was struck to commemorate the defeat and fall of Napoleon at Waterloo. Now that I would be interested in.
So, who is Napoleon, and why are you not a fan of him?
But then Napoleon Bonaparte came from Corsica and worked his way up the ranks in the French military. And through the French Revolution and by conniving, that's the easiest way I could say, he got himself into the position of the sole ruler of France. And the reason I don't like him is because he used the principles of the French Revolution to get to where he was. And then as soon as he got there, he betrayed all of them, everyone and all of them, and declared himself an emperor, which is by far worse than a king. And they've just gotten rid of the king. And now they have this emperor that they have to deal with. And I suppose you could say that arguably the First World War is the Napoleonic Wars, because they raged all over Europe. You know, millions of people died on both sides, thanks to Napoleon. And he really didn't care about that. He cared about the position and where he was and what was happening with himself. And so he makes this campaign into Russia. He betrays one of his allies, Tsar Alexander I of Russia, and invades Russia after he promised he wouldn't. And the Russians and Hitler didn't learn from Napoleon. He should have a really good way of dealing with that kind of thing and set the retreat the whole time. And so Napoleon thought he was winning. And as they were retreating, they were going deeper and deeper and deeper into Russia. Well, you get so far in, and he got to Moscow, and winter was coming, and that's a problem. And the Russians burned their own capital, burned it to the ground, destroyed all the foodstuffs, all the fields, the city, everything was all in flames, leaving Napoleon nothing at all to supply his troops. And he was too far away now from any base that he could resupply. And so he eventually had to retreat. And most of his army froze to death. I think he came back with maybe 500 of the 500 and some thousand men he went into Russia with.
Wow.
I think so, something close to that. And he left, of course, because he knew he was in trouble. And so he got in a coach and left all of his soldiers and everything there to die. And they all saw him leave and go back to Paris. And so I'm not a fan of Napoleon.
Yeah.
I mean, he did do some good things for France. I have to give him credit for that. But for the rest of the world, he was tyrant par excellence.
Okay, I've got another question. What's the difference between emperor and a king? Because you said, an emperor is much worse than a king.
Yes.
Why are they different?
An emperor is a king of kings. An emperor has kings under him. he's in control of many different kings.
Gotcha.
And so that puts him in a very powerful position. You know,
And then the kings in turn have lords,
and everything below them.
and that's a lord is over a castle essentially, right?
Yeah.
In a kingdom.
Yeah.
And then you have peasants and whatnots that work under them, serfs, everything.
Yes.
Okay.
And so as Emperor of the French now, Napoleon essentially ruled the Western world with all of his victories until they finally were able to stop him in a field called Waterloo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank heavens.
And for the listeners, what was the time frame approximately of Napoleon? You said he was just after the French Revolution.
Yeah, you see him actively around 1790s. Of course, he was defeated in 1815, and he was then set into final exile because he escaped the first exile when he was forced to abdicate. And so they sent him to an island so far away that no one had ever heard of it before, you know. And they say you can be king of the island for the rest of your life, but under British authority. And so they stationed a British brigade there, troops. And he stayed there until he died.
It's a fitting punishment, isn't it?
Yes, it is, because it was very boring. And Napoleon wasn't used to that at all.
I've heard Napoleon was rather short. Is this
He
true?
was. He was. And his hat helps compensate for that, you know, because this is a high round hat. And he's famous for holding his hand into his coat like that, you know, and everybody copies that, including the Russian rulers in the Soviet Union did that. You know, and it seems that that's a symbol now of a tyrant is to do that. And he died and was buried on the island and probably poisoned. It's a good chance that he was, you know, and buried there. And then France went back to a monarchy. Louis XVIII, Charles X, and Louis Philippe, the citizen king. And then with the abdication of Louis Philippe, the president of the French Republic, whose name was Louis Napoleon. So you have Louis King, Napoleon Emperor. Louis Napoleon came to power, and he staged a successful coup and established the Second Empire with himself as emperor. And he was Napoleon's nephew. And so he sent for his body and had it brought back to Paris. And the big Arc de Triomphe, you know, that's all the Napoleonic kinds of thing, was built to the honor and glory of Napoleon and all of that. And they brought him back, and they buried him in the Invalides, which is a military hospital built by Louis XIV in the 17th century. And Louis XIV was builder of Versailles, the greatest palace in the world, and the prototype for all others. But anyway, Louis XIV built the world's first veterans hospital, and it's called Les Invalides, or the Invalids. And they buried him in the Royal Church of the Invalides there, in a huge granite tomb. It's just absolutely gigantic. Yeah.
And if I remember right, Napoleon was the one who we secured the Louisiana Purchase through, wasn't it?
Yes. So he didn't care about the French lands in America. He was really only concerned about Europe. And so he needed money, and that was a quick way to get it. And
Yeah.
so he sold it, yeah.
Wait, so bring back for people who don't know, what's the Louisiana Purchase? What is that?
You'd probably better be able to explain it.
The Louisiana Purchase was the territory owned and claimed by France in the New World. And it went from the borders of the then United States of America, which was basically the 13 colonies. And it went all the way over, went from Canada down to Louisiana. It was this massive amount of land. It's essentially the entire middle of the United States that Napoleon sold for a ridiculous price. It's like $1 an acre, something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cheap. I heard the purchase price was like 15 million or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Something just
Wow.
absurdly
mean-
low.
For like 1/3 of the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so who knows?
And then a lot of the western part of the U.S. and some of the southern was owned by Mexico at that time, right?
Yes, the Southwest was all Spanish territory, Mexican Spanish territory.
Okay.
Because originally Mexico was not independent of Spain, and so
Right.
it was Spanish territory, and then it became Mexican territory. And then you have the Northwest, and that all belonged to England. Washington, Oregon,
Okay.
Idaho, Montana, that area there.
And then a lot of Canada was French as well.
Well,
Or
yes.
disputed.
Yes, it was disputed, and they fought a bunch of wars and eventually isolated the French to the province of Quebec, which speaks French. Everybody else in Canada speaks English, but they speak French because they are French, and they're very proud of it. And the capital is in Quebec. And
Yeah. Was it the French who burned our capital?
the British,
The British. Okay.
yes. And they burned our capital because we invaded them. See, we
That's
actually
fair.
started that war. Canadians didn't. We wanted to annex Canada as part of the United States. And so we invaded them, and Britain's response was, and the Canadians, and we fought several battles, and they won. And they came down and burned the capital.
There you go.
So the new artifact that you got, essentially, what does it mean to you, and why did you want it so much?
Oh, because it represents the demise of someone I really despise, who I think was not a blessing to the world. As I said, he did some good things for France. I give him credit for that. But for everyone else, and the millions and millions of people who died, and everybody lost their families and their property and everything. It was just really awful. But it's a solid silver medal. It's about that big. And on the one side, it shows
That mic likes to drift a little bit.
Oh,
Can you-
kind of like my
actual
mind.
mic? Angle it
Kind
up
of
a
like the
little bit.
Gigantomachy,
Yeah.
Greco-Roman
There we go.
mythology, which was the greatest battle the Greeks ever fought in their mythological format. It's the battle between the Titans, who were the earth gods, and the sky gods, which was Zeus, Mount Olympus, and all of that. And so it was a do or die, all or nothing fight. And the sky gods eventually won, and of course the sky gods represent those who defeated Napoleon. He represents the Titans. And on the other side, it has 4 portraits of the 4 rulers who defeated him. George IV of England, who was essentially an idiot, but all he did was supply troops, which is a big deal, but he really wasn't too terribly interested in that. The King of Prussia, the King of, not the King, the Habsburg Emperor, who became the king of the Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Those 4, there are portraits of them on there. And they're
Interesting.
all very excited.
Have you acquired anything else that was quite exciting for you in the past year and a half?
Year and a half. Maybe a bronze, and again another medal, of the time of King George II of England, about 1742, something like that. And it shows a portrait of George II. And he's important to musicians and to Brits and lovers of British things, because his favorite composer was Handel, and he helped make Handel internationally famous. They had Germans ruled the government, and Germans ruled the music world and the art world. It was all Germans, even though it was in England. Well, anyway, he commissioned Handel to write the coronation anthems the music to be performed at the coronation, his coronation. And it's so wonderful. It's been performed at every coronation from George II's time, down to Charles III, who we just heard a week or so ago. It was performed again. Yeah. Or Charles III. Yeah, I didn't say Charles III. Got to get that right.
So, what is your most favorite thing you've ever collected?
Oh, heavens.
Ooh.
That's a toughie.
Try angling the.
Just
Just
angle it
angle
Gosh,
it up.
I've
And it
got
should be fine.
so many favorite things.
There we go. Perfect.
Or like that signifies the most to you, the most meaning?
The most meaning. Oh, there are several, but they're for different reasons. We have a large, in terms of painting, and old master paintings, we have a large, about half the size of this table here, oil painting of the Marquis de Lafayette, who was the French hero of the American Revolution and the French hero of the French Revolution. You know, and Lafayette created the French flag as it is today, and you know, he, with Thomas Jefferson, wrote the French Constitution, the first constitution for France. And he established the French National Guard, and he was its first commandant, commanding general. And it's a portrait of him seated at a table in his commandant's uniform, you know, working on a map, presumably strategy. And it's a beautiful thing. And as a work of art, it's wonderful because it is an old master and it is original. It was painted in Paris in 1789, the year of the outbreak of the French Revolution, by a well-known portrait artist by the name of Henri-Pierre Dandelou. And it's a large portrait for portraits. Normally, if they're going to get that big, we're getting close to full-size portraits. But this one is half size, waist up, you know. But there are three that survive of this size. One is in France, two are in the United States, and of the two in the United States, one is in our family room.
That's pretty cool.
Well,
It hangs there. So that's one. I guess we have a marble head of Louis XVI, who was beheaded in the French Revolution, along with Marie Antoinette. It is the largest surviving fragment of a bust, and it is the original one. It's not a reproduction.
how do you even go about like acquiring all these things?
Yeah, you just going in pawn shops everywhere, or
Yeah,
where do you find them?
I'm a bit of a bloodhound, you know, and I like Antiques Roadshow and things like that because that's exactly how you do it. You know, you have to know what things are and know what you recognize what you see when you see it, and you can pick up some really good things for pretty cheap prices, you know, because others don't know what it is. Yeah. Or you can get out there with your metal detector and
Look around.
an Englishman just recently found a 2.5-inch solid gold figurine turned out to be King Henry VI as a saint, which was part of the original Crown of England before Cromwell destroyed the crown jewels. So it's older than the crowns are today, like what's used at Charles's coronation. And it turned out to be a piece of that, and he just found it on a golf course in
Wow.
about 2 inches of dirt.
So I do have a question about, say you find antiques or like, you know, you're treasure hunting, right, somewhere like South America or you're, you know, in Europe. Doesn't that belong to like the crown, or do you can you use that? Like, I don't know. I've heard a lot that if you find something, you have to like turn it into like the museums and stuff like that.
Well, you have to register it with the government. Didn't used to have to do that, but now you do. For example, in France, where I do most of my collecting, the government has right to everything that's out there. And so if you buy something and the French government thinks it's of value, they'll go ahead and let you buy it, but they won't let you take it out of the country. because it's part of French heritage, you know. And I have to say, since a lot of our things were bought before that was put into place, we have a number of things that the French government would really like to get back. They're not going to, but not in my lifetime. But they would like to have them.
Yeah.
So after you graduate to the next life, where is all this going to go? What are you going to do with it?
Well, there's two options. Keep it in the family, which, of course, the great English landed families, that's what they did. They collected and kept it in the family through the centuries, you know, and now they're all priceless things. Or give it to a museum. Mm-hmm. One of those two options. And it kind of depends upon what our kids decide, if they're really that interested in it. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling, you know, I'd rather keep the collection together than break it up, because it's worth more as a collection. You break it up, it isn't as valuable.
Yeah.
I've also got another question regarding your past, because I'm sure we've talked about this on the last podcast.
Far past.
Yeah, way far back. Just like, how did you get into this? Like, what series of jobs did you have to where, you know, you got into the collection of these artifacts, I guess we would say?
Well, I guess I have to go back to when I was about 12 years old, and I have to give my mother credit for this. I mean, we were raised on a farm, but she would take us to antique shops, really nice ones in Kansas City, and teach us about all this stuff, you know. And the most important thing I think I learned from that experience was she taught me how to tell the difference between good, better, and best. And that can be very subtle and slight in some cases, and you have to have a real discerning eye. That's good, this is better, but that over here, that's the best. You know, and that's going to command the highest price. But I found that to be true not only with antiques, but with people as well. You get that discerning sense, and you can tell this is a good person. This person here, there's a little more to them, and this one over here is a real jewel. You know?
Yeah.
Like you.
Thank you.
You know, I look up at the sky and I hear the Cessnas going on. I always think, is that you? And I wave, you know.
It very well could be me. Especially during nights. So go down I-15 about twice a month or so.
I heard, I think, what was a small engine plane a couple of nights ago. I thought, gee, it's rather late, because it was like 2 in the morning, something like that.
Yeah, I'm usually over by I-15 on my night flights, so you may or may not hear me. You're pretty close to I-15.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's cool.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What's your most memorable experience of the past year? So far, we'll say.
Most memorable experience. Gosh, there's been a number of them. I did bring something that might be, because it does deal with that. One of my favorite sheroes. There are heroes and there are she-ros. She is a black woman who became a national treasure, and she became the poet laureate of the United States until the time of her death, and her name is Maya Angelou. And she talks about the importance in our personal lives of being a blessing to other people, of being good for other people. I think that's interesting. She didn't say doing good. She said being good. Doing good, of course, is implied in that, but she said being good. And she quoted a Negro spiritual, which said, be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. Now that's something that we can all do. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of effort to do that. And she said, I've had so many rainbows in my clouds, and I take them with me wherever I go. And it doesn't matter if they're black or white or straight or gay or speak Spanish or English or believe in God or don't believe in God, eat the same food. None of that matters. Absolutely none of that matters. It's just that they have done something good for me. And whenever I go to do something, I take them with me, in my heart. And she says, we need to be better at that, being a rainbow in somebody else's cloud. She did say this. She said, to be a rainbow on someone's cloud means to cultivate loving kindness as a daily practice in life. Now that's something this world is in sore need of. Is that there's no civility really, and kindness is in short supply, it seems. And people would rather spit at you or kill you or whatever. You have to agree with me or we can't be friends, which I think is ridiculous. But anyway, she says, cultivate loving kindness as a daily practice in your life. It means turning into your heart, practicing empathy, and using that empathy to connect to those around you in meaningful ways. And that's a very meaningful thing for me, is what she says there in that. She says, so try to be a rainbow in someone else's cloud. There's definitely enough cloudy weather out there, a lot of cloudiness in people's lives. And so I think maybe it's a good thing, it has been for me, to, to stop and reevaluate a little bit, to contemplate my own life, to consider my own ways, which has been very, very helpful to me. And whenever I consider my ways as an individual, it comes down to three things. I found it always goes back to that. What am I giving, and to who am I giving it to, and why? To look at that. And number two is forgiving, which for me is a little more difficult than maybe the first one, more challenging. But it helps me to remember what St. Augustine once said: resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other guy to die.
Yep.
And the third one is hope. Hope for new beginnings. That the end is not the end. It's the end of a particular chapter, perhaps, but it's not the end of the story. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too. And so the kindness thing, I had an experience with that. I think it's on my phone here. And it really does. It makes such a difference in people's lives, is to be kind to them. Just to... Oh, thank
Just
you.
in case you want to reach it.
Yeah. What was I working with?
Kindness.
I was having a problem with a company, a car company. I won't mention which one, although I'd like to, because it's very well known. It's one people trust all the time for. And I was trying to cancel my membership, and they wouldn't let me. And they were doing it on purpose. It put me in a loop, so there was no way you could get done what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And after trying everything, then I had a little pop-up thing that says, and if you don't get what you need here, go to this, click on this, and there's a guy that will help you. And so I clicked on it, and the guy came on, and I told him the situation, very frustrated, and he said, well, let's try this. And about an hour later, he says, well, I've exhausted everything I can think of. I don't know what else to do. I said, well, just have to kind of wait and be patient, see if they, take the initiative on it. And I'm going, a corporation? I don't think so. And I said, thank you for your time, and wished him a good day. And shortly thereafter, I got this email from him. And it says, "You are kind." There's that word. "You are kind to take the time to thank me. Your words make a difference. Thanks." Then he texted me again and he said, "I wish all my customers were as patient and understanding as you are. Thanks again." And then I stopped to think about that. And I realized that this guy probably has the worst job in the whole world, because no one talks to him unless they are already madder than a hornet and frustrated out of their mind. And it's probably no one ever says anything kind to him, much less decent, every day of his life on his job. And so I thought about that, and I thought, well, maybe just that "thank you" and "have a good day" really had a much greater impact than I would have thought it had. And what effort did it take from me? Nothing, really, But there it is. And I think if there was more of that kind of interaction in our world today, the world would be a more hopeful place. So that's a long answer to what's been meaningful to me of late.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. That's kind of nice, huh? Okay, next question.
You got a new car. Are you still loving it?
Oh, of course I love it. It's out there, parked very carefully. Of course. Out there. Yeah, I'm a spoiled brat when it comes to my new car. It's an old car, actually. It's a new used car. New for me, but an older car. It's a 2011 Lincoln MKX, which is a luxury SUV, to speak of, And the thing is so intelligent, it practically drives itself. I don't have to do hardly anything. For example, it has a voice command on it, and all I have to do is push that button, and the voice of a nice young woman comes on and says, "And what command would you like?" And I say, "Well, turn on the heater, turn on the air conditioner, change the radio, or do this," and it does it, like that. When I buy a car, I'm into it for two things: color and sound. The engine and all of the mechanical stuff I really don't know a whole lot about. And the color was right. It is a glitter Bordeaux red, which is a wonderful red, intense red that has the glitter in it. It's just wonderful. Never thought I'd have that. You like that one?
Yeah, that's what the color of my truck was when I had it.
Oh, wow, good taste. What happened to your truck?
It was too expensive,
Oh,
so I got a smaller car.
yeah.
It's not that you couldn't afford it; you chose not to, right?
Yeah. I figured I'd want to save more money than spend it, so.
Yeah, that was a wise decision, a noble sacrifice.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't do that. They'd rather be in debt,
Yeah.
to get what they want. And sound-wise, it has a stunning sound system in it. It has a stunning stereo system, which is just wonderful. But it has a second option, and that is a surround sound system. And when I press on that activates 16 speakers and 2 subwoofers in the cabin. And when you turn the music on, it boom, it blows everyone out the window.
What kind of music are we listening to on these speakers?
Oh, all kinds. One of my neighbors looked at me and said, "So you were that kind of teenager?" And I said, "Yep, I'm that kind of an adult." Yeah, I said, "Yep." So I like country, I like rock, I like classical, I like about everything, because I have a degree in music, everything except punk rock. And I can even handle heavy metal, some of it.
Yeah.
Metallica and things like that, I can even handle a little Uptown Funk and who knows what else.
Like the old classics, like Freebird.
Oh, yes.
That was a good one.
Yep. Yep. So, yeah. And it's just wonderful because people, as I'm going down the freeway, they can hear it because it goes so that everything shakes in the car. The doors shake. Everything shakes. And you know they're hearing it at the stoplight. And I'm going, and turn it up.
You want to hear too?
Yeah. Oh, this is wicked, isn't it?
I love that. That's a good
But
in car.
it has heating in all of the seats, not just the driver's seat. Front and back are all heated and air conditioned. Every one. So everybody gets their own little unit to control. And letting up and lowering the seats, I don't have to do that. Just push a button and it does that. And takes care of that. And it has a radar system in it, which is really nice, which determines the distance of vehicles around you and next to you, particularly the ones in front and the ones in back. I mean, it has the camera, but it's got this too. And it determines if something is too close or rapidly approaching faster than it ought to. And if it's not satisfied with how quickly you're responding, it will brake for you. It'll do it. So you don't have to do that.
That's nice.
Yeah, so if you're going to hit a kid on a tricycle, it keeps that from happening. It does that, and even the windshield is intelligent. I mean, it gives you warnings, but you don't have to turn on the windshield wipers, for example. It detects when water is hitting it, and it automatically turns on the windshield wipers. And it can also detect how much water is coming down, and it will change the speed of the windshield wiper accordingly. You just don't have to do with it. So I'm a spoiled brat.
Yeah, basically just got to push the gas pedal sometimes.
Yep, that's it. That's it. That's about it. Yep.
That's awesome.
So,
How much did it cost?
Well, I got it for a really good deal. $6,700
It's not bad.
for a car new that was $52,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whose technical options on it are equal to the new ones today, and in some cases even better. Still, even though it's that old.
Yeah.
And it's well taken care of. It has a light tan interior with the red exterior. It's in really good shape. Yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
wonderful.
That's awesome.
So you've been doing quite a bit of traveling this year.
Yeah,
Is that fairly common for you, or is
No.
this kind of a newer thing?
it's a newer thing
Okay.
that my wife and I are doing. We're not getting any younger, and so, they say retirement is made up of 3 areas. Where you want to get up and go, where you don't do so much getting up and going, and then finally when you don't go at all. And what too many people do is they wait till the don't go at all stage. They're putting it off until when we have more money or whatever. And then it's too late. So we're doing that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
Heck yeah.
I noticed.
That was awesome.
I don't love the word retirement, because when I was doing garage doors, I noticed when people said they were retired, or when they did retire, they aged so much faster.
Yeah.
Because they're I don't know if they weren't active or what it was, but they would age super quickly. Even if they're 5 years out of retirement and they're just sitting at home loving it, but they looked much older than they ought to.
Yeah, I worry about that.
Oh, you're fine.
Some new wrinkles here.
We don't know how old you are.
Oh, that's good. Because sometimes I don't know either. It depends upon the day and how I'm acting as to how old I am.
That's fair.
How old are you?
old enough to know better, but young enough to still be interested.
I like
There
it.
you go.
Fair enough. I remember something. Did you used to be a teacher,
Yes,
professor?
yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I retired as a university professor in the history of art and architecture in Western civilization. And I did that for 17 some years. Loved it. Hated retiring, just hated it.
Did you have to?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, they have this policy that when you reach a certain age, apparently you become stupid and you're no longer valuable, which, in my opinion, and I emphasize opinion, I question their own stupidity, because you get someone who has all the years of experience and knowledge and know-how and all of this, and you kick them out the back door and put someone in who hasn't got a tenth of that,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, you'd think that's the point where they'd get a fat pay raise instead of being kicked out the door.
Yeah, well, that didn't happen. A fat pay raise kind of thing. Yeah, I did that, and I also taught music in high school. I've had the privilege of teaching every grade from kindergarten through graduate school, everyone, didn't miss a one.
Wow.
So I know exactly what it's like is through the whole
Mm-hmm.
procedure.
That's cool. Do you think there's something wrong with our school system now? And would you change it if you could, or do you think things kind of work the way?
Ooh, you don't want to get me on that one. Yeah, I think there's a lot wrong with our school system. I think there is way too much influencing going on from all different sections, you know, and that they're responding to that rather than, and this is my opinion, rather than what is the right and sensible thing to do. You know, that doesn't mean you say, well, who determines what's right? Right, for me, seems to be a matter of conscience. And it doesn't take a great deal of thought. I just simply have to say, if I did this, how would someone respond to that? How would I want to be treated? And normally, if I act according to the way I would want to be treated, it's not a difficult question to answer. But things are getting so out of hand and so violent and so, you know, and just so out of control.
Do you think that violence is ever the answer?
Never.
Really?
I don't think violence is ever the answer. Because violence breeds violence, and how can that solve anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Eye for an eye, everyone ends up blind.
Yes, yes. And for some people, it takes a lifetime to discover that blindness is not just for people who cannot see with their eyes. There's a whole nother world of blindness out there.
Mm-hmm. Let me snag you a better chair real quick.
Oh, I'm okay.
Well, I got a comfier one right here if you'd like.
Oh, then I'll fall asleep.
Have you ever read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius?
Yes.
What do you think about that book?
Well, he's a Stoic philosopher. Okay. And so a lot of what he says follows the Stoicism and the philosophies of Stoic philosophers. I like a lot of what Marcus Aurelius says. He was the last of the 5 good emperors of Rome, and Rome would have done well to pay attention to him,
Yeah.
which they didn't. Oh,
Hopefully
okay.
this one will be a little comfier for you.
All right. Ooh, this is like my car seat. Oh, the other thing the 2 seats have on the front of my car, the driver's side and the passenger side, is a lumbar massager, which goes from the base of the spine to the bottom of the neck. And so while you're driving, you're getting this. You got your tunes going. You got this massage going.
A heated massage.
Yes, or a cooled one, depending
Yeah.
on which one you want.
Is it the type of massage that's like the balls that are
Yes.
in there? And
Yeah, it does that.
yeah. Those are nice.
Yeah, they are.
Makes it so your hips and legs don't die when you're driving.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have a great deal of respect for Marcus Aurelius. Yeah.
Have you? Oh, go ahead. Have you read any of Ayn Rand's works?
Such as.
Well, my personal favorite is Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, no, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, it was.
What do you like about it?
So I love the whole idea of that there are creators in this world, and there are people who will say feed off of the creators in this world. Not to say that they can't be creators themselves; they just choose not to. And kind of the premise of the book is that the great creators in the world are being taxed and hindered and whatnot by a government, and they decide to walk away from society. The great business owners, the great minds of the time, everything, they're just like, okay, we're walking away. It's become too much. We're gonna go create our own little sanctuary and see how the world does without us. Kind of let the system crumble, and then they can come back and rebuild from the ashes. Which it's pretty. It's kind of a large step to take, but I found it very intriguing. And they created their own little sanctuary. Like, everything was great there. Everyone was working, helping. Everyone was happy. And then the world just kind of collapsed on itself as to find new creators, or those people who just fed off them all the time
Yes.
didn't succeed.
Yeah.
It was a very intriguing book.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it portrayed the vast majority of people as leeches, who fed off of.
Yeah, that's
They didn't do
kind of what it
anything
is.
creative on their own. They just
Right.
fed
Yeah.
off of what
Yeah.
others did.
And they didn't have anything against the common man. It was a thing against the oppressive government that they were under. They kept giving them these regulations, and you have to pay workers for not working and things like that. They're like, we're done. Very thought-provoking. But she was Ayn Rand. I don't know how much you know about Ayn Rand, but she was during the anti-communist era, like 50s to 70s-ish.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
With what's his name? Who was the senator? McCarthy.
Oh, yeah.
McCarthyism.
Yep.
Mhm. They went to the communist witch hunt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was during that time period and had some very interesting works. She wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness, which was intriguing because most people don't like selfishness, and it's a sin, whatever they might believe. But the base premise of that book is for you to be able to help anybody out or assist anyone, then you have to take care of yourself.
Well,
Right.
I think that's more, again, this is just my thinking. I think that's more self-care than selfishness.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of yourself and just let everybody, do all the things for everybody and nothing for yourself, there's nothing left for you to give anymore.
Yeah. And that was kind of the premise of the book. Like,
Yeah,
can't give anything if you don't got nothing.
that's
So-
right. That's right.
So,
Well, I think she named it the virtue of selfishness part for that shock factor.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a swear word to most people, but if you look it up in the dictionary, the word selfish just means, or selfishness just means doing something for one's own benefit. Which, if you really look at that, there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
It's when you step on people and hurt people to get what you want.
that's
in my
right.
opinion.
That's right. I think that's a good opinion. I'd vote for it.
I want to hear about, because you had degrees in music, you did art history for a number of years. things like that. What are, let's say, 2 or 3 of the most thought-provoking nonfiction books you've read? If you can recall. I know you've probably had a lot of years of reading, but...
Well, actually, that is a toughie because I'm really not a nonfiction reader.
okay.
I read. I'm really not a fiction reader. I read nonfiction all the time
Yeah.
because I'm constantly trying to learn and get more and more and more. Not that you can't learn from fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, like Maya Angelou and people like you're doing, but I find myself much more drawn into the who, what, why, when, and where of this topic or that topic or this topic. Yeah, I'm not a Louis L'Amour fan.
What does he write about?
Romantic novels.
Oh, that's fair.
But
so-
I think some of the great novels, Leo Tolstoy,
okay.
and Dostoevsky, they're two ones that I find very intriguing.
Yeah. What's the, well, because you read nonfiction books, what are some of your favorites? You mentioned Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. Are those your top favorite authors, or are they just
Well,
one
in the
of them?
novelist
Okay.
realm, they're
All right.
up there.
Yeah.
What do they write about?
Oh, Tolstoy's magnificent work, monumental, is War and Peace.
That's a good one.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's a book about that thick. But it's well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't handle that, just watch the Hollywood movie and you'll kind of get a sense of it.
They also have Audible.
Yes, and Audible and things like that. So, but yeah, there's just so many things I'm interested in that I want to know about. I like to know about science and astronomy and astrology, and astrology is not a science according to some people, but and physics and music. And the one thing I don't really want to know a lot about in this life is math.
Most people can agree on that one.
And I'm really prejudiced about that one, but art and theater and history and all forms of it, because history is the evolution of mankind. It's the experience, it's the human experience, and I'm very much interested in what's human and what that's all about. And history has a tendency, even though it's generally written by the victors, and you have to be careful with it, but it's a wonderful thing because it kind of chronicles the humanness of humanity, and you can see it as it goes, and that's always very interesting to me.
Do you think history is repeating itself right now?
Yes, and the reason it is because we've refused to learn from the past. We don't know the past anymore. It's not important. It's not a computer chip, excuse me. It's not social media. It's not current events. Doesn't seem to be the thing that our culture is focusing on at the present time. And of course, the greatest reason in my mind for studying history, and by the way, I don't want to be too critical of that because I put the blame for this mostly at high school history teachers. Because generally they're football coaches and basketball coaches, people who know nothing about history, but they've got to fill their schedule, and keep them on his end. So they put them in these history classes, and they don't know anything, and students just die on the vine, because history is not really dates, places, and that type of thing. It's more, in my opinion, what I talked about earlier is more a sense of what is human and what it means to be human and how that has evolved over time. Getting to know people that way. But yeah, the greatest reason I think there is for studying history is very simple. If you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you are. And if you don't know where you are, you will certainly never know where you're going. And I think we're in the we don't know where we're going stage of things because we don't know the past. And so you are forced to repeat it.
Yeah. What does it mean to be human to you?
Well, let's see. Maybe I brought something about that.
I was gonna say, let's open this binder, see what else you brought us.
Oh, it's got some noodles, stuff, more than I could ever find. Our neighbor, it's high school graduation time, and so our neighbor is graduating. He's a wonderful kid. He's had a very hard life, and this is to the graduate. In my opinion, it applies not only to high school graduation, but graduation from life, becoming human, And that's a day-to-day process. In spite of where time and circumstance would throw us, you have to kind of grab a hold of that direction. And it says this: act with confidence even if you don't feel it. Keep the company of people you admire, for you will become like them. Never wait for the perfect circumstances. Begin where you are and with whatever you've got. Let curiosity and enthusiasm guide you always, and keep your heart light and filled with optimism.
And the graduating student wrote that?
No, this is on the card for him.
Okay.
That's fun.
This is, yeah, and I like that. Human beings a human being doesn't have to be perfect. A human being doesn't have to know everything. A human being doesn't have to accomplish everything. A human being doesn't have to be better than someone else. A human being just needs to be willing, I think. Willing to consider that which others do not. And I think the more a person becomes that way, the more human they become. Mm-hmm. And empathetic and compassionate and all of those kinds of things. Oh, thank you. Runny nose. It always does that.
Thank you.
I don't know why. But anyway, I figured that out. But anyway, yeah. There's a lot of love and compassion and empathy and understanding and willingness to be there for others in their time of need, and essentially any time. Mm-hmm. I think the best of humanity is with someone, giving them the best of who and what they are at all times. And what is human about that is the discovery of what those things are.
We've had this conversation with a couple of guests, or this question, but curious your thoughts. Do you think that people can be born inherently evil, or do they choose into evil, or bad choices, I should say?
I don't think, and this is my opinion, that people are born inherently evil. Mm-hmm. I think they're born inherently good, and evil is something they learn.
That's fair.
Yeah, they had a talk about, it was kind of a touchy subject, but they were talking the other day about homeless people making poor decisions, and therefore it's their fault and they deserve what they get. And I'm going, you should look in the mirror, my friend. You've never made a poor decision. And maybe you should look at you in the mirror before you say something like that about someone else. I said, for me, the poor decisions are decisions made by the poor. In other words, their poverty colors their thinking. And if they weren't in the circumstances and situations that they're in, their decisions probably would be different. But because they find themselves in those circumstances and situations, and that's all they know, they make poor decisions. So I guess I'm saying it's all in terminology, it's all in perspective. It's decisions, for me, poor decisions are decisions made by the poor. And since I think that we are all poor in something, we all make poor decisions at various times. And I think it'd be much more productive to look in the mirror than it would be to point the finger at someone else, regardless of their circumstances. But that's just me. I'm a cockeyed optimist.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I would agree with it for sure.
Yeah.
Looked in the mirror plenty, and it's difficult for people. That's why it's way easier to be like, yeah, you suck, and I'm better, and here's why. So it makes sense why the world is why it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Exactly. And I think it takes a lot of courage to do that. You know, and it takes a willingness to admit that you're wrong. But I think admitting that you're wrong is the first step to correcting whatever problem it is. You know.
I've got an interesting thought-provoking question for you. Maybe it's not thought-provoking, but it is interesting. So, a lot of, how do I phrase this? All right, I'll start this way. So, a lot of people, well, we'll say some people with the perspective that you have, you know, everybody's a gem, love everybody, and approach them with love. I've met a lot of young people who have done like psychedelics and whatnots, and they come out of it with similar views. Two-part question: have you ever done psychedelics or any mind-altering things?
No.
And then two,
I haven't needed to. I've got a great imagination.
yeah, there you go. And then two, do you think those things can sometimes speed up the process of coming about to a perspective that most people get towards the end of their life? Yeah.
Well, Maya Angelou once again said something I thought was very profound. He said that we should be cautious of the visions that race up the veins of our children.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, drugs.
good.
Drugs?
Up the veins.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Said we should be cautious of the visions that race up the arms of our children. And we should step back and be concerned.
Yeah.
For is that really the vision we want them to have?
Depends on the drug.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. But yeah, but I think that is a legitimate concern. You know, I'm not in favor of anything which causes someone to lose control over their situation and circumstances. I mean, it's hard enough to get through day-to-day life, you know, without something that hinders that.
Yeah.
And so I see that as being a detrimental thing in the terms of addictiveness, you know, and that sucks life out of people. I mean, they have this wonderful high, but it leaves them lower than they were before. It in time will rob them of everything. That's just my opinion. I know there are a lot who would disagree with that, but
No, I've had a few uncles that died because of drug use.
yeah.
Yeah, depending on the drug, especially if it's an addictive drug, it can go south really quick.
Yes. And I think with all the problems there are on painkillers,
Yes.
which people got into not as a recreational thing,
Mm-hmm.
that is evidence of the damage that it can do, which permeates, it's not just one life, it's a connection of lives
Mm-hmm.
that are hurt by it. And that's, I guess, one of the reasons why I don't like it, is it interferes with the connectiveness that I think is so critical to being human,
Yeah,
being connected with other people.
that's true. I've heard a lot of stories of people who will say something more non-addictive. We'll say cannabis or mushrooms, something more natural. We'll say. Heard of a lot of people who come off of those, and they feel more connected. Do you think that's a fake connection, or do you think that's a doorway they opened up that they may or may not, or they maybe shouldn't have opened? That's what I should say.
Well, I think it could be a combination of both. Opening doors prematurely can be devastating,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if someone isn't willing to accept what they see.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point.
What are your thoughts on religion versus spirituality? And which
That's
one
a
are,
good question.
I think, this is my opinion for any of you who are listening, I think religion is opposed to spirituality. Religion is institutional. Spirituality is not.
which one are you?
Well, I belong to a religion, but I think that I'm a spiritual person. I could be deluding myself, in that I do not allow the institution to dictate to me what I am and am not going to think. And so that makes me highly radical to a lot of people in the institution. I do not believe in just doing something because someone else told you to do it. No. Think for yourself. You know, you're not an idiot. You know, people have been given, according to religion, the God-given ability to discern right from wrong and to have that ability. And I say, well, then, for heaven's sakes, let them use it. Don't stop telling them what they have to do this or they have to do that. You know, so spirituality. I think a person can be religious and not spiritual. And I think there's a lot of that out there. But I think it's difficult to be spiritual in the society that we live in now, which mistakes religion for spirituality. You do this, you look like this, you say this, you act like that, and then you're spiritual. You know, you buy this book and read it, and then you're a spiritual person. Not so sure that in itself defines spirituality.
What does define spirituality?
I think the pursuit and desire of connection with deity, and desire for that connection with deity.
Deity being creator?
Could be. It could be. Like Maya Angelou says, I've referred to her a lot, you know. Different people call God different things, and some don't even call it God, you know.
Yeah.
But we need to respect that in others, I think. You learn a lot more that way, I think, but anyway. Yeah, spirituality. Religion makes the mistake, in my opinion, of not understanding the difference between sameness and oneness.
Okay.
Sameness and oneness are not the same thing, although they're often expressed as the same thing, but they're not. oneness, spirituality, let's see, not oneness, spirituality. Sameness is a matter of outward appearance, whereas oneness is a matter of the heart. And if you think oneness is looking alike, talking alike, thinking alike, saying alike, being carbon copies of one another, subjugating your own will to another's, except to God's, I think can be a very dangerous thing. And that requires, spirituality requires the development of that relationship with deity, whatever you consider it to be, I think. Because it's generally always a higher power, and that connection with that higher power generally results in a better individual.
So, would you say you have a complete connection with deity, not just a partial, but a complete? Or what is that? What does that look like for you?
It's not complete, but it's growing.
Okay.
And that's the thing that's critical to me. Is it growing? I'm not sure one ever completes it in this life, because perfection is a bit of an elusive thing in an imperfect world.
Yeah.
And we talk about it, but I'm not sure we really know in an imperfect world what we're talking about. But I think it's growing, it's becoming.
Yeah.
And I think, and I like to associate with people who are growing and becoming. And a religious person sometimes would say, well, I will do that, but you've got to be becoming like this, or you're not. And I'm going, No, I like to be around people who are becoming in ever so many different ways. You learn a whole lot more that way from them, rather than insisting that you become like me. Michelangelo, the world's master artist, said, all roads lead to God. And each man's path is made by his walking. In other words, ultimately, like all roads lead to Rome, ultimately, wherever you're going and you're going and you're going, it's going to bring us to one point, to one place. How we got there isn't going to be the same, for heaven's sakes. And oftentimes I find religion saying it has to be this way or no way at all. And I believe more what Michelangelo said, that every man has a path to God, and each man's path is made by his walking. Mine was made by carving stone, and with each new work, I drew one step nearer home.
Interesting. Okay, so...
See, and I like to be around people like that. I find them very intriguing, uplifting, and challenging in a very positive way, refreshing way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And so a follow-up question then, why would you say why, I guess, do you belong to an institution when what I'm gathering is you're quite a lot more spiritual?
I think so, yes. So it goes back to the sameness and oneness of, talk alike, look alike, walk alike, just essentially. That type of attitude, I guess, in a way, reflects the idea that in the song When the Saints Go Marching Home, that we're all going to line up in a row and march into the celestial kingdom, whatever, and I don't think it's going to be that way. That's my opinion. Because Christ never prayed for sameness, he always prayed for oneness. Saying, if we're one, you can be homeless and I can be a millionaire. The outward appearance doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the heart. However, in the world in which we live now, even in institutions, that matters a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see it as a problem. Therefore, I enjoy homeless people. I enjoy people who are as far off the spectrum in one direction as I may be in another, except for when it comes to causing harm, doing harm to someone else. That I don't abide with.
So you're probably not really a fan of nihilists as much.
Maybe not.
Depending on, I guess, their views.
Yeah.
That's fair. So, say in.
I mean, like when you
Yes.
and I met,
Yeah.
here you are working on putting in a garage door in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Some would look at that and say, look at your position. You're here, and this person is here, and therefore there's no connection. See, and I disagree with that violently. I see what I see in the individual. I look for the heart, and therefore I enjoy rich and rewarding friendships and relationships like the one we have. I told a new friend of mine who happens to be one of my doctors, who's only 30 years old. And we're really close, and I said, when I give my heart, it's forever. I don't ever take it back, no matter what. And that's just the way I am. And because the opportunity I have to connect with an individual is so rare and so unique, because that person is unique, that it's something to be highly valued. And he looked at me one day and he said, you and I have been friends for a long time, haven't we? Longer than this life, huh? And I says, yeah, we have. A lot longer than this life. And it will continue so, way beyond when this one is forgotten, of so much of what caused pain.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I was installing your garage door, I sensed that something was different by about the second question.
So you were very perceptive. I picked up on that. So it's like, okay, this guy is perceptive.
Yeah, it was fun. And then that was 2, maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Does it still run good?
Run good?
Yeah, does it?
The
Garage door? Oh, yes, it does. I was confused there for a minute. Run good. I say, what? Yeah,
I don't
it
do
does.
much running, but
Yeah.
You see, and so I consider that friendship and relationship unique because we're unique individuals, but precious beyond measure. Because of that, the sharing of one's heart is a sacred thing.
Mm-hmm.
What does trust mean to you?
You're coming out with bangers tonight.
Thanks.
Good job.
Thanks.
Trust. Trust for me, in part, means I can give you my heart and not fear for its well-being.
Yeah. I agree with that too.
Can trust be broken, and can it be earned back? Or is it always less after it is broken? Or is it more?
Well, I think it can be earned back, not easily,
Yeah.
And I think when it is, it can be more then. But that was dependent upon the willingness to forgive both parties involved, to forgive themselves and to forgive the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think it can be more, can be. I mean, we live in a society that says once a this, always a this.
Yeah, I have a real problem with felony charges.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not personally, but I have a real problem with how those stick with somebody.
Yeah, I have a problem with that and about every other charge that
Yeah.
levied against someone, particularly in a religious context, because if you do that, then where is forgiveness?
Non-existent.
It doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are a lot of people who say, well, yeah, but this person did this, and you can't trust them to do this and this and this and this. And once of this, always of that, so beware. And I don't think a person needs to be pegged into a box like that, because you refuse to give them the chance to prove that there's something different.
Now, does this depend on the crime, or do you think any crime should be able to, or we'll say anything a person does should be able to be washed away in society eventually?
I think if the person changes and truly changes and moves on, they should be given the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because in a spiritual sense, the Lord taught that inasmuch as you judge others this way, that's the way you're going to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to judge someone with that limitation, then I'm not willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. And once of this, always of this. Guess what? According to a spiritual understanding of that, that's exactly the way I'm going to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be given that same thing, and I desperately need that same thing. I need to have that
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt.
I've got a good movie for you to watch if you haven't seen it. Have you seen The Shack?
I may have, but I'll go home and watch it.
All right.
I've heard of it.
I can text it to you so you remember too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're watching that tonight too.
Yeah?
Actually.
Tell me how much you don't like it. Just kidding. I didn't
Okay.
enjoy it, but it is a very, very thought-provoking and spirit-provoking movie. I think you'd really like it.
Yeah, I probably would.
At least for that aspect.
Have you seen the movie The Atom Project?
No, is that one of the newer ones?
It has Ryan Reynolds in it.
I haven't. That's the one where they're working on the atom bomb, right?
No,
Time.
Different one.
it's the time travel one. where
Time
he-
travel.
Oh.
Yeah. Does he go back and see his kid, or is it him going back and seeing himself as a child?
He goes back and sees himself because he's misdialed on the,
It sounds familiar.
and so he sees him as he was as a kid, and it's how the two interact with each other.
That's right.
Yes, I have seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. I'll have to watch it again.
Yeah, there's some, I think, very insightful comments made there.
Yeah. I watched another good one today called In Time. For those of you who haven't seen it, it is pretty thought-provoking. It's a damn good movie. So, premise of it is that everybody has 25 years guaranteed to live. I mean, obviously if they get killed in a car accident or something, they're not going to live. But they have 25 years to live their natural life. After that, they have a timer on their arm that starts. They have 1 year on this timer. Time is, in this world, time is the currency. And so you have the poor who are just trying to work day in and day out, living literally day to day, hour to hour, trying to work their butts off to get more time. And then you have the ultra wealthy who own 1,000,000 years or whatever, and they can live forever as long as nothing extra happens to
Ew,
them.
I wouldn't like that.
No, but it's a very interesting movie.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be interested in the movie, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
like that
No.
idea that the more money you have, you get to be, it's again that privileged idea.
Yeah.
If you're privileged, then you can have all these things.
And the cool thing about what the American dream used to be is that you can work your way up, right? You can work out of it. It seems a little harder now than it was, say, beginning of the 1900s, mid 1900s, but I still think it's possible. You just then there's finding the balance of, do you get to be there for your family or do you get to claw your way up the ladder? And it's a very interesting predicament that the newer generations get to deal with in the coming years. I'm sure you see it all the time. Yeah.
Well, the tragedy is, of course, in my opinion, is someone claws their way to the top, up
Yeah.
the ladder, only to find that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. Yeah.
But then that makes you ask the question, what do you actually want?
Exactly.
What do you really want?
See, privileged status to me, when I was talking about that a minute ago, the privilege, if it's tied to monetary things, I suppose that's one form of privilege. But there's another form of privilege that's not tied to monetary things that allows for relationships and acquaintances and sharing that wouldn't occur on other planes necessarily. And because it does, it is a privilege, and you're privileged that way. And I think of the two, by far the more stable is the relationship. And by far the more permanent is the relationship one. So
I can agree.
I consider myself to be very privileged, but for different reasons than what society determines a privileged person is or says a privileged person is.
And I say, why can't you have both?
Well, yeah.
Now, of course, there's a balance. There's always a balance, yin and yang. It's time immemorial, the thoughts. you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm doing my best to get both.
Well, good for you. I like that idea because you're going for it. You're going for the whole ball of wax.
Yep.
And I'm not so sure that it has to be an either or kind of thing. I'm not. No. What I was suggesting was that if I had to make a choice, that's what I
course.
would choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had to or got to redo it, like everything, would you take that opportunity?
Wait, with the current knowledge you have, right?
Sure.
What would you do anything different in your life, leading up to this point? We'll say you have the current knowledge, current experience. You start over from, let's say, 18. What would you do different or better?
I'm
if
not
anything?
sure I would.
Okay.
And the reason I'm not sure I would is because what I have been through has brought me to this point.
Yes.
And I like what I see, And so I'm not so sure I would do it differently. I'm not so sure I'd want to change the timeline, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or how it is. That may be a stupid thing to say, but it says something about how much I value the present and how enticing the future seems to be.
Yeah, it seems that a lot of the younger generation lives in the future and never gets to experience the present.
Oh, true. And they need to know. I think the younger generation needs hope in the worst way. They need to know that life is worth living, and and it matters what they do and what they think and what they feel, and they can do things and be things and become things. Maya Angelou once again says, Martin Luther King was a great man, but if we focus on his greatness too much, then he becomes inaccessible.
Yeah.
And people think, well, I can't do that. I can't be like that. Says, and they need to know that he was human. He was a human being. Yes, a great man, but a human being. And yes, you can. And you can. He is accessible. And I think young people need to know that it is possible.
Yeah, it all comes down to perspective and choice.
Yeah.
It's easy as that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Perspective and choice. I think, again, the caution I would have with that is perspective and choice, assuming the individual is given the opportunity free of encumbrances of situations and circumstances and that. Because I think sometimes people make choices that aren't what they would do if
They didn't have outside influence.
they didn't have some of the things that they've got. Yeah. In other words, for example, we went to Washington State to visit with the parents, the in-laws of a guy who was married to one of our daughters. And he left her and his children and the church all at the same time. You know, probably wasn't the best decision.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, and you're friends with his parents? And I said, yeah, they didn't make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing we try to do to help the parents see is that you didn't make that choice. He made that choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nothing for you to feel bad about, nothing for you to think, well, what if I'd done this and what did we do wrong? All of that. I says, that's not productive and it simply does not apply. And to help them see that it's okay to still love him because he did a terrible thing and how could he have done that? And yet he's my child, and so there's that that goes on, you know. To help them see, yeah, it's okay to love him. I mean, good people do bad things, and the problem is when good people do bad things, we have a tendency to forget the good and assume that because they did bad things, that means they're a bad person. And that is simply not true. Thank heavens the Savior gave us a perspective on that.
Yeah.
So my question would be, like, it sounds bad from just us, like, from just a person's standpoint, but what makes his choices bad versus good? Because in his eyes, they're fantastic. In many others' eyes, it's like, yeah, that obviously that was life-changing and not the best choice. So what makes it a good versus bad choice?
I could tell you a couple of reasons, but I do want to hear.
Oh, go ahead. I don't see it as a good decision, what he did. I mean, a lot of people would say, you know, it's your daughter, and it's, you know, and it was your grandchildren. And I said, yeah, but there's his grandchildren too, that was hurt horribly by this. How do you even talk to them? And I says, well, that would be very limiting, wouldn't it? Plus, it would eliminate the opportunity of helping them to forgive themselves for something that they don't need to be forgiven for.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people out there who are struggling with that, who are trying to forgive themselves for something which in reality they don't need to be forgiven for. What were your thoughts?
I was just going to say the absolute worst part of that is that the kids will now grow up without, I wouldn't say without, but less of a father figure in their life. Because best case scenario, probably split custody. I don't know what the scenario is, but.
Yeah, they have joint custody.
Yeah, and so they get to experience one and then the other. They don't get to experience them together. They don't get to experience that teamwork of their parents. They don't get to see how a good, healthy relationship looks, and so likelihood is their relationships will struggle, and their learning will be hindered.
Well, that's the problem with the current generation. They're not having kids.
Yeah.
And the reason they're not having kids, part of it is selfish, maybe.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is they look at their parents and they see what, you know, I don't want to do that. You know?
Well, to play devil's advocate, because obviously I know that.
Of course.
But on the other hand, it could give an opportunity for a new father figure to come through. Granted, not the biological one, but it still gives the opportunity to show what a beautiful relationship could be if your daughter does find another man.
She has. She's remarried to a wonderful man who has 4 children.
And that is true.
And he's a great guy. I love him to death. I think he's just stunningly wonderful.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's awesome news.
Whether or not, like, it does open that opportunity, and I'm not saying that wouldn't be a good thing either, but it still creates a little damage.
Oh, sure. Yeah, without a doubt.
But maybe.
Yeah, we have experience speaking here.
Yeah.
You're the best one to talk about this.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, I don't know. Just that, it's like, it's still going to hurt no matter what. So I kind of agree with Noah where you never got to see that. And it's hard because you're stuck kind of figuring things out on your own because when one parent's trying to teach you, you're not getting the full thing. So sometimes you'll regret even what the one parent left has to teach you, because you're just so angry, or you're like, this doesn't make any sense. So you reject it all, and you become very inwardly focused, or like, surviving on your own.
Yes, I think that's a lot of what's happening to the younger generation. They see what happened to their parents, and he left our daughter and is living with another woman, and in a strange, weird way, eliminating certain societal norms, I can kind of see a little bit of logic to that reasoning. Well, we saw what happened to our parents, and this didn't work, and all of this, so let's live together and try it out and see if it works. And if it does, then we'll go ahead. I mean, in that perspective, limited as it is, there is a certain amount of logic to doing what I see some of them doing.
Yeah.
And so I certainly don't condemn anyone for what they're doing. I certainly don't know what they've been through and how they perceive things. I just want to be the person that can say to people, where are you going? I don't care where you're going. Where are you going? And how can I help you get there?
Yeah. I think what I'm getting from what you're trying to say is the kids nowadays maybe take a little longer to find that partner, because they're trying different things out, saying, hey, what's going to work the best, and how, can we live with not jumping into a marriage and being like, oh shit, later down the road, like, this doesn't work, and now we have kids, so we can't separate, making sure, hey, we're actually going to be good partners for our whole life, so we can take care of our kids.
Exactly.
And there's pros and cons to both, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. But now that's going to make me an enemy to a lot of people who say, well, you have to do this, and you have to be married, and you have to do and all of that. And I'm going, and is that your decision?
Yeah.
And my answer to that is no, it's not your decision. So, butt out.
I'm curious to see over the next 10, 20 years, because right now, I believe the U.S. has close to a 50% divorce rate overall, which is, if it's not 50, it's ridiculously high. But I am curious to see all the generation that grew up with those divorces, how that will change over the next 20 years, and what that trend will be like, whether they end up finding lifelong partners by trying out a few and living with them and all that before getting married, or whether it was better the old-fashioned way before we had no-fault divorce, where it's basically you're locked in, this is the way it is.
40 to 50.
40 to 50%? Okay. Yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes.
Well, the Amish kind of have a thing, sort of like what I've suggested here. They have a try it out thing. And so you've got a guy and a girl, and before they get married, they stay together. They even sleep in the same bed together. There's a board that separates the two of them, but nonetheless, they're in bed together and all of this, and they try it out, and see, does this look like it's going to work? And then if everybody thinks that it is a good thing, then they go and get married.
I've never heard of that. That's interesting.
It is.
And then you have places like India, which is arranged marriages for the most part, and I've heard they have around like a 1% divorce rate.
Wow.
Which is interesting, because
is it harder to get divorced over there?
I imagine it would be, but I have no clue.
Yeah.
I have no clue on that. It's just a stat I heard the other day.
Yeah.
They have super low divorce rate, whether that's because of the law or the fact that they just get assigned and they're like, "Okay, we'll make it work." I don't know.
Well, depending upon what the offense is, you can lose a hand, a head, or a foot.
Yeah.
Stoned to death or something.
Yeah, that's a pretty good deterrent.
Yeah, that would be. So, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what are your thoughts about the Russia war right now in Ukraine?
Oh,
And on top of that, why is it happening?
He just did a face palm for the listeners.
Yeah.
yeah. I think Putin is a deluded, tyrannical, self-absorbed individual who is losing touch with reality day by day. Why he did that, it seems, see, Putin, before the collapse of the Soviet Union, was in the KGB. And he considered the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest disgrace that Russia has ever had. And so he was going to correct that. And the way he was going to correct that was to go after Ukraine. He started with Crimea and all of that, and he said, and if it worked there, then he would begin to reabsorb other things that, around there that aren't, according to one idea, and I think there's a lot to that. Another one says he did that in order to keep NATO at bay. Well, that was a stupid thing, because what all that did was brought NATO right to his very borders. When Finland and Sweden became part of NATO, Finland is, Sweden isn't yet, but they will be. And Ukraine will be too in time, I think.
Do you think Russia may join NATO?
I think Putin would have to be out of the way.
Yeah. Once he is gone.
I think it's a possibility. See, the other possibility I think that Putin has to be careful of was if Russia loses this, and there are already provinces in the Soviet, in the Russian thing, that are thinking, if the Ukrainians can get away with it, well, we can too. That Russia will fall apart, that the whole Russian Federation will they're already looking at that and thinking about, well, if they do, we'll watch it and see that it'll just all break down. And Putin did this, so he says, to gain territory, and in reality, he may very well lose much of it, and even that which he had.
Do you think he'd nuke before he ever did that?
He'll use nukes?
Yeah.
Well, I think his mental state is questionable, and I think it's a possibility, but I hope someone stops him before that happens.
Yeah.
Who do that. They have a bomb which he has used, which is by far worse than a nuclear bomb, I think.
What is it?
It's a bomb that when it blows up, it sucks all the air out of everything, and you die immediately.
Whoa.
And what's wonderful about that bomb is the people die, but it doesn't destroy the buildings or any of the property. Because it just, in its explosion, it sucks up oxygen literally out of people's lungs and everything in the environment, and they all die.
I have not heard of that, but that is crazy.
He's used it a couple of times now in different places.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
And it's an agonizing death, and they just fall right over, They just die on the spot. There's nothing you can do about it.
So, well, I don't really know what to say after that, but
Well, you don't want to be anywhere around it.
I don't. Well, what do you think is going to happen?
I don't know. I hope Ukraine wins, but that's my own. Because they didn't invite this, they didn't start it, they didn't, Putin is obviously the aggressor in this thing, and a tyrant. They seem to be losing tons and tons of people, and they don't have ammunition, they don't have supplies, and they don't have all this kind of stuff, and so the Ukrainians, they're getting a lot of stuff from the West, from NATO and things, are able to use things that the Russians don't have access to. Yeah. So I don't know. I hope they do, but I am eternally vote for the underdog.
Yeah.
Whoever the underdog is, I'm generally there. So yeah, I'm with Ukraine. And the other thing that I think is a little strange about that is the origin of Russia is Kiev.
Oh, really?
All Russians, that's where Russians began, is in Kiev.
Ukraine's capital. Interesting.
It's the birthplace of Russia. And they go from there to Moscow and
Yeah.
other places. So they're destroying their own heritage.
Yeah.
Doesn't make much sense. But yeah, I hope they get. If they're going to go for it, I hope they go for Crimea and take that back too.
Yeah.
I hope they get it all back.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Kind of a shift here. Were you a fan, or are you a fan of the founding fathers of America? And if there's some you don't appreciate as much, which ones?
Oh yeah, I'm a fan of the founding fathers. I think that they were very radical. They were revolutionaries, of course. They were outcasts to the establishment. But I'm a fan of them because they all knew when they signed it on the dotted line that if they lost, they would die. They would all be executed, and they did it anyway. And I think there are reasons for doing it, or noble ones. However, it is becoming more and more obvious that the statements about King George III and the Declaration of Independence are not correct.
Really?
Yeah, that is propaganda.
Mm.
That George III wasn't this terrible, awful tyrant, that the Declaration says he was. And they've pretty much proved that, with documents and things they found in England, in the National Library, in the Royal Archives, and things like that, as to what the king was really doing. And it turns out he would have taken them back if they would have come back, he said. And if you've studied American history, the real problem is not the king. They make it out as if it is. It's not. The problem is taxation without representation. That's not a royal prerogative. That's Parliament. That's a parliamentary problem. Because the king doesn't have the power to do that kind of thing anymore. George III didn't have it. Last one who had the power to do that was Charles I. He lost his head over it. So the king really isn't the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
He really isn't. It's the taxation, because it all is over the taxation of the imposition of taxes. No matter, it was really minuscule the taxes were, but even so, we thought that they thought that if you're going to tax us, then we need to have representation, like everybody else, that we're not secondary. That we're not secondary Brits, that we're. And I think they did everything they could to try and keep it within the boundaries. I mean, they wrote letters to the king, they visited the king, and this type of thing to see what could be worked out. I mean, there's a wonderful scene where John Adams is the first ambassador to England after the separation, where he meets George III. It's really a wonderful scene and moment there, because you see that George III was not this idiot who was like he's portrayed to be, but that he really has his heart and his mind in the right places. He asks Adams, he says, I hear that you have some sensitivities towards France. France and England are enemies. And he says, France? And he laughs. He says, no. We hold only to our own country. And we hold to that first and foremost. And George says, and so it should be to anyone. So I don't know. You might want to read some of the new stuff out on George III because it's pretty good.
Yeah, I might have to. I've read a lot of the history of the U.S. from the Revolutionary War and up. Luckily, not a whole lot of it was about propaganda about King George. I haven't heard a ton about that, but yeah, very fascinating stuff.
So yeah, I'm a fan of them. It is popular now to try and de-evolve the founding fathers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jefferson and the slave situation, and
Yeah.
Washington with his, and all of this, and of course politically what they're doing now is getting rid of all the statues of Confederate this and that and whatever. And I think so what are they going to do? Are they going to take the Jefferson Memorial down? Are they going to, if they keep going, I guess you could find things about anyone that wouldn't be necessarily,
Pristine.
yeah. But I think it's sad. I think they're going overboard with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice if the chronicles of the truth of history was commonplace in the schools, especially.
Oh, that'll never happen.
No.
Mm-mm.
You got to start by having them say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, they're not going to do that. See, when I was in grade school, we did say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Me too. Me till about middle school, or maybe it was even 6th grade. Then it was just cut out, which I find to be a big shame.
Well, anything having to do with God has been taken out of the schools, and that's one of the problems I have with schools, is that they've allowed that to happen, because that's a big part of our history, whether people want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
I mean, George Washington's vision and all of that kind of stuff, that's all part of the historical record, but you won't find it in any textbook.
Yeah. What was it like when you were a teacher?
When I'm a radical person. I did what I wanted to do. That didn't make me very popular with certain people,
Sure.
you know. But in other words, I wouldn't adhere to school policy if I felt it wasn't fair.
Yeah.
In other words, for example, if you knew that somebody did something or was involved in something, then it was your responsibility as a teacher to rat on them, and I would never do that.
Right.
Consequently, students trusted me because they knew I wouldn't talk, and they knew that whatever they said would be kept between the two of us. And a lot more got accomplished that way, actually, than running to rat on somebody because, oh, this person did that or this person did this. Now, I understand the caution is that what do you know if somebody's got a gun? Well, I think that, but we didn't have those problems back then when I was there. I think that's a little different situation. I think if you know about that, yeah, you probably ought to say something, or at least say, well, I think there's a problem here.
Yeah.
But we didn't have anything like that when I was teaching high school.
Interesting.
I think there's
The
too much.
biggest thing we had was who was doing what to who under the bleachers.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that still is a problem.
Probably more so.
Yeah,
Oh
probably.
dear. Funny.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say I think there's too much fear around guns nowadays. I've seen pictures of schools. I don't know if it was mid 1900s or somewhere in there, but they had a school shooter threat at the school essentially, and some of the students went in their cars, grabbed their rifles, and sat outside the door like, okay, like I think schools would be a safer place if first there was a bigger focus, arguably even a lesser focus, but mental health issues. That's a big thing, and
Agreed.
well, I think it's a big thing, and I also think it's a trendy thing at the same time. Um, and so a lot of it's coming out, and there's a lot of people claiming they have these things when it may or may not be the case. Granted that maybe that's how they feel, but that's been interesting. And then the just the ability to help kids with some of these things without drugging them out of their minds would be very beneficial, I think.
I don't think that's an effective approach to mental health. To
Yeah.
take a child with ADHD or whatever it is and drug them up with whatever, just so that they become a zombie and sit there and don't create a problem. I don't think that's the way to do it.
It's evil.
Yeah.
It just takes away the kid's opportunity to be a kid.
I know.
That pisses me off so fucking bad, and I just found out someone in our family does that. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? It
Dopes the kid.
yeah, it bothers my brain bad. Because I've seen grown-ass adults on Adderall, and it's just odd. And so I couldn't even imagine doing it to a kid. I could not imagine it.
I know. They were talking about child slave situations in England in the 19th century and child labor laws and all of this kind of stuff and what children were subjected to all the time, which is unbelievable. I mean, you can't even imagine what it is. And people say, well, they outlawed that and we don't have a problem with that. And I'm going, I think we do. I think it's more subtle, but I think it's there. And it's in our country, and it's in with human trafficking and all of the things that children are subjected to and stolen and never recover from. A lot of them get killed. But,
Yeah.
so I think we do have a problem with that. It's maybe taking a little bit different form, but it's just as, in the end, it's the same result.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How do you do that to a child? I don't know.
It's essentially murdering a kid. Like
Yeah.
in the same form of abortion, but now your child is alive and thriving. Now let's make them brain dead. Just not be a kid anymore. It's so fucking wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
What do you think?
Okay, I'm just listening. I agree drugging out your kids is not the answer. Now, occasionally if they've got something in their brain that's, we'll say off balance, like, hormones going crazy, whatever they've got, there could definitely be situations where you'd be like, okay, they need a little bit of this to help out. But I think it's handed out like candy.
Yeah,
For
the
very
school
simple
shouldn't be in
reasons.
charge
Yeah.
of that.
No. And I also think that children experiencing work can be very beneficial. Not like it was where they're, pulling full grown adult hours at factories and stuff, but working with their parents on things around the house, learning from both parents, different things to do, getting a work ethic, I think be super beneficial for kids. I know the schools try to establish a work ethic, but most of the kids I see coming right out of school don't have a work ethic.
No, they don't.
They usually just have a middle finger to the world. So, and fair enough, really.
Yeah.
I mean, when you shove a bunch of kids in a place where they don't want to be and then say learn and memorize a bunch of shit that they don't really care about.
And you can't work together.
And you can't work
That doesn't
together.
apply in real life. You
And
can't
you're-
use a calculator. You'll always have a calculator. It's, yes, no basic math, but yeah.
I think there's a level of learning that you should be able to get to, like English and like stuff to be able to read and maybe do basic math, but after that, like, let them pick what they're interested in and go do that. And
I
work together
think that's true.
and round table it so you're each learning from each other. I don't know. I think there's
Yeah,
a lot
trade
wrong
school.
with it. Like when I was in high school, I was like, I don't give a flying fuck about any of this shit. So I came out just saying, fuck school. I don't
Yeah.
want to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
No, for
And
sure.
as I understand it, school was originally created by a lot of the larger corporate entities as well as the government to churn out good employees for these businesses. And that's just not the way humanity really works.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, you let it. I'm really find very intriguing the new high schools and schools that are out there that this is a school for Broadway musicals. This is a school for theater. This is a school
Oh,
that
yeah.
does that. That's all, and everybody goes there. That's what they do, you know. But they're all there because they want to be there, and because they've achieved a level of proficiency and show potential in that. And why it's wonderful. They just get on. They have regular studies, but it's not the emphasis. The emphasis is what they're there for. And I think that's wonderful because they're a lot happier. And boy, do they perform. And what they produce is wonderful.
I mean, even in any trade school, think about a doctor. If their parents or anyone's like pushing them to be a doctor, do you think that person's going to be a better doctor than the person who is genuinely interested in saving people's lives and like interested in human anatomy and how to fix people? That person's going to be a way better doctor because they actually want to be there.
Yep, I agree with that.
I also don't like that they start having you choose a career early middle school. You don't know what the hell you want. Even in the mid-20s, you're figuring it out.
Of course.
So it's like you're making these 13-year-olds choose what they want to do the rest of their life. Like, I have an issue with that. Let them explore, you know?
See, I had that problem when I was teaching university. They have to declare a major at their freshman entrance there,
Yeah.
and you can't do that.
Oh.
You have no idea, like you say, even at that level, what you want to do. And students would come to me and be concerned about that. I says, don't worry about it. You can change your major, whether they say you can't or you can. You can change your major. So go out there and explore. Give yourself the privilege and opportunity to explore, and then do what you want to do. Well, the administration didn't like that, but who cares?
And then if you are going to teach kids like things that you have to have a scheduled curriculum, teach them stuff that they're going to be able to use, like how to do their taxes and how to be good with money.
Oh, we can't learn how to do our taxes, then the government would lose out.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm saying this is how it should be.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to make them learn something, make it useful.
Yes.
If the education department was a private entity, then that's how it would be.
Yeah.
They would teach you valuable knowledge instead of standardized knowledge.
Ew, I hate standardized anything.
Uh-huh.
My opinion.
Yep. Instead, we got the private prison system.
Well, I think standardized anything is a recipe for mediocrity.
I agree.
Well, yeah, look at socialism or communism. They're all standard. They're all the same. And they do nothing. Because they can't really.
It hasn't been done the right way yet.
Dude, that. Oh, I thought you were being serious. I was like, there's no right way to do it.
No, that's the argument, is it hasn't been done the right way yet. That's been the argument each time it's been tried.
I wonder what the right way would be.
Well, you can, according to the teachings of Joseph Smith, there is a right way. It's not communism. Communism is the wrong way. The right way is the law of consecration.
Meaning?
Meaning that you consecrate everything you have to the church and kingdom of God on the earth for the building up of Zion. And then you're given back what you need as a stewardship. And that which is excessive or is taken and given to somebody who needs it and all that, and they're given a stewardship over it. People say, thank God we don't have to live that now. We just have the law of tithing. And I'm going, well, you don't understand. I can't wait for it to happen. I said, go back and read the Revelations carefully. I mean, if you believe in that stuff. And yeah.
Pretty song though.
Yeah. Oh, that's somebody who wants insurance. I don't want to talk to them.
Little rascals.
Yeah, I know. So in the law, in what Joseph taught was that, yes, in the beginning, that's how it's done. Mm-hmm. But in the Lord's eyes, the law of consecration provides for needs and wants. See, they don't know anything about the wants thing. And I said, when the needs of all are taken care of that way, then the wants become open season. And the wonderful thing that makes that possible is in the law of consecration, you do what you're good at, what you were talking about. If you're, let's say you're a great musician, today it's difficult to make a living with that. Under the law of consecration, that's not a problem. It's what you do best. Some people make money. Well, that's what they do best, and that's what they get to do. I mean, whatever it is that you do the best at, that's what your life's work is. Now, how many people would hate their jobs under that system?
Zero.
Not any.
Not any. And then, let's say now, a college education. Well, it's becoming more and more expensive, and for an elite, I'm opposed to that. Under the law of consecration, not a problem at all. If that's where you're going and that's what you need in order to do what you want to do, then it's provided. You don't have that financial stress. And let's say that, let's go back to the music thing. Let's say you need a Steinway grand piano. The Steinway grand piano, horribly expensive. Several $100,000 for one, right? Who can afford that? You know, only the really rich. But let's say that you are developed in your understanding and proficiency that you need a piano like that. Mm-hmm.
Must be some important insurance.
Under the law of consecration, that isn't a problem. If you need that and you're at that level, you get it. Let's say your work requires a certain type of truck, an expensive one, that's got all the whatever. But if that's what you need in order to do your job, you don't have the financial burden from that. That's provided for you. I mean, the law of consecration is the most wonderful thing. If people only understood it, you know. And as long as what a person wants does not go against infringing or hurting another, mm-hmm. you can have it.
But who's providing that?
The what?
Who's providing that? Like the trucks and all the grand pianos.
All of that. The people who are good at making money and the people who are good at doing various different things like that. And that's not everybody's bag, but it is some. But instead of keeping that money for themselves, it goes towards the good of the group, and it provides that for everybody else. Now, which system would you rather have? Now where we're financially stressed all the time and no one can afford anything, or this?
I like now because it provides, let's just say you would not know happiness without sadness.
Oh,
You
I
would
see
not
what
know.
you're getting
Yeah. I love the, now sometimes I don't love it, but love the, yeah, love the adversity of it, right?
Yeah.
I love the challenge that's part of part of my learning and growing in that way. I don't know. Now, I would still learn and grow under the law of conservation.
Yeah, you'd be challenged, but
Yeah.
not just for your own benefit.
Right. Yeah.
You'd be challenged for the benefit of others as well.
Mm-hmm.
I see your point. Mm-hmm. You could have your red truck, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
You've been awfully quiet tonight.
Just listening.
Oh, that's good. I can see thoughts going on up there. Yeah.
Do I smell smoke? No, I'm just kidding.
It's my runny nose. But
Awesome. With that, I want to ask, do you have any final words for the listeners? Any words of advice? Answers to the universe?
just be kind. Be considerate. Reach out with every opportunity that you have, for you never know what small thing you do will have in the life of someone else. And be yourself. Don't negotiate with others about who and what you are. It's not so much what you are as it is who you are, and that's worth taking the time to find out. And then be true to that. You won't always be popular, but you can lay your head on the pillow at night knowing that there's at least one person who likes you, and that's you.
Amen to
Awesome.
All right.
that. Thank you, Jim, for coming on again.
Thank you.
Well,
Really
thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me and listening to all of my rattling on about whatever.
That's what we
It was
like.
fantastic.
And to the listeners, we'll see y'all next week.
Peace out.
See you later.